usually when we talk to people who have written sales books, sales is in the very early vintage of their career. They're like, I was a high school student, and then I was going to go to university. I dropped out. I did some sales, and then I killed it, and I did really well. And then I went back to school, and I just sales my life. Or like I was the junior most guy selling stuff door to door, this and that, and then they climbed the ranks, and this is what they've learned along the way. And compared to virtually all of those authors that we've spoken to, you come to it late in the game, and then actually kind of at a reasonably high post, and you came through like consulting, like strategy consulting too, in particular. So give us like a little bit of that 2006 and 7 vintage and what you were doing in those years and how it led to subject matter expertise you have.
2006, 2007, I started working at an industrial distribution company. The CFO had been brought in to turn this thing around. It was a mess. The company growing really fast, and there just wasn't professional management in place. It was a couple of guys that bought it out of bankruptcy, I think, and then they just had a bunch of workers doing a bunch of things. And since it was a commodity distributor, it had gone up in price substantially because commodity went up in price, and that's what happens in distribution businesses. And one of the things the CFO said to me is, he said, let's figure out ways to make more money and do it profitably. So I'm sitting there in the office, and my job's financial analyst. So I'm in front of a spreadsheet, just doing that stuff all day. I go sit in the room with the salespeople and listen to what they do. And I made an observation that they were all just talking to the people they knew real well. They were having comfortable conversations with folks that were buying from them consistently. And then when I said, well, how do you find new businesses? I said, well, sometimes stuff gets referred in. I thought, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I told my boss, I said, why don't we hire some junior salespeople and just tell them to go call on all the customers that don't buy anything from us right now. And what do you know, that worked. So we did more of it. And eventually we turned that 20-person inside sales team that was just doing the thing with their existing customers. We added 7 people on top of that to go find additional business inside of our target market, and then started layering what we now call enablement resources on top of them around playbooks and things like that. And that was 2007, 2008, 2009. So that was me doing sales enablement before I knew what that word meant.
Right. Okay. So you just didn't get the, you just haven't like tagged it with the label, but yeah, right. That is classic sales enablement. And it was Roderick Jefferson who actually put us onto you, who's another guy who's like really flying the flag for what sales enablement is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's the way I look at it is as a business role. It's not a thing that does some stuff. It's really helping an organization take a prospect-centric mindset from role to role to role to role, all in support of the prospect. And then the nuance here is that everyone's customer centric, or at least says they are. Mm-hmm. But when you're solely focused on the customer, there are things that remove focus from the prospect, because over focus on customer centricity leads to things like hesitancy to ask for case studies or referrals or something like that, because the customer might not be in a perfect spot, or overbuilding for what specifically customers want, as opposed to building product for the broader market that could lead to more business from more customers, things like that. So it's a little nuanced, but I think that when we look at the world and say, we want to make sure that we're supporting our prospects, what they need, that's where I see true sales enablement. And that can come from every single department of the company, from sales to customer success to marketing to finance, which is one of the most important ones, and so on.
I think that over reliance on customer centricity, including some of the weaknesses that come along with that way of thinking, got started with Peter Drucker saying, well, the purpose of a business is to find and to keep its customer. And it seemed like the really revolutionary insight was to keep its customer. It's like, you should actually migrate your business if the customer is leaving you. but maybe they dropped the first part of that sentence, which was to find them in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. Drucker said a few things that were somewhat misinterpreted. I think that one is very good. He also talked about how the business's goal is to profitably serve a customer, which I think is good.
Mm.
Especially with a long-term version. Short term, it might not be profitable to acquire the customer, but longer term, it definitely pays off. I think the place where he was most misinterpreted was around if you must be able to measure it if you're going to manage it, or something. You can't manage what you don't measure, something to that effect. And his words were actually, give it in his own words later in life. He said, yeah, they took what I was trying to say and twisted it a little bit, but he only did that after W. Edwards Deming came out and said, look, that's not how great management works, because Deming is one of the greatest thought leaders when it comes to quality. He went over to Japan after World War II, helped them turn around the auto industry, and is responsible for a lot of the things that modern businesses do with respect to quality. And he's against quotas 100%. He says that if you give an employee a quota, you are putting them down a path that limits their ability to really, one, do their job to the best extent and then receive fulfillment. And he says, replace things like that with great leadership. And I think that's really fascinating.
What's the guy's name?
W. Edwards Deming, D-E-M-I-N-G.
Oh, yes, Deming. I've heard of that, but that's a good reference to go give a read. Do you have like a name of a book or an article that we should direct people to?
His best book's called Out of the Crisis, and you're going to want to stab your eyeballs out with a pencil if you read it. So,
oh yeah,
it's one of the 600 pages long. So he's got a PhD in statistics, and it's one of those things that it's written like he has a PhD in statistics.
Yeah,
not casual nights. It's the opposite of watching the Kardashians.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Polar opposite.
Right. Well, both of them could cause you to pull out the pencils, I think.
That's true. Everything has something in common. That's
right. That he brought balance into the world by bringing a 600-page stats text to us.
Yeah. He's got there's one of his things is the 14 rules, and I think just looking up the 14 rules on Wikipedia and understanding that from a management standpoint is pretty transformational for me. I think it's key. It goes well beyond the folks on LinkedIn that just learned something and want to share it with the world.
Yeah.
I always say LinkedIn is a coming of age story. It's like, oh, that's cute. That's what you learned yesterday. Cool. Can't wait till you get to the next. It's like that scene in Good Will Hunting where he's ripping the guy apart. He's like, oh yeah, next semester you're going to learn about so-and-so. And then you're going to come back and tell me this other thing. Okay.
Yeah, cool. That's right. Speaking of books, I came to you through Sales Enablement Playbook, which was so interesting. There's a couple of really very, what would you say? They're kind of just grassroots observations. They seem in keeping with what you said about sitting in a room near a bunch of salespeople and going, hang on a minute, what about this? Yeah. And then your subsequent book was about coaching, and it's called, well, first of all, it's called 5 Secrets of a Sales Coach, but then it's also written in a very unorthodox manner. So just like, before I ask you 20 things about that book, who's it for, and why did you write it the way you did?
It's for people that manage revenue teams, from sales development, sales engineering, customer success, and folks who lead those managers. And when you say unorthodox, it's unorthodox because it's a fiction book. Yeah, there's some business fiction books out there. My other books, I've written 8 books. All of the other ones are subheadings, bullet points, action items, key takeaways, what you'd expect in just a hardcore, I'm going to pick this up and do something with the type book. Well, we originally wrote the 5 Secrets of a Sales Coach in the same manner. After reflection, we realized something. You ever watch South Park?
Yes.
Okay. You know Eric Cartman, right?
Yes.
Eric Cartman, the little kid that's always causing problems. Well, if Eric Cartman were a human being, everyone would hate him because he's just a jerk, but he's a cartoon, so we think he's funny. And when you're writing a business, it's so funny. This just all ties back to South Park. when you're writing a business book, you have to be definitive. You have to take a stance. You have to come up with frameworks and talk about the application of these frameworks in different scenarios and all that type of stuff. But you can't waffle, and you can't say, well, sometimes it's this and sometimes it's that and sometimes it's the other, because that's not helpful to the audience. The audience is coming to you for expertise and guidance and some kind of definitive point of view, at least within subsets of what you're talking about. Everything can't be, it depends. Well, when we're observing how sales managers act and some of the different personas that they take on in their duties, they actually do lots of different things. And some of them are in conflict with each other. We wanted to explore that. And so instead of coming in and waffling and failing to be definitive from a nonfiction business book perspective, we explored these different nuances of different types of sales managers through character. So we established several different characters throughout the book and follow one main character, Arlo, as he goes through his journey from realizing he's not a good sales manager to a chance encounter with a woman named Alex, who was a really boss sales leader at a coffee shop. And then all of a sudden she took him under his wing and through other people on her team showed him the way. Well, we were able to explore a lot of these different styles and techniques and archetypes of sales managers by writing this way. That's why we did it. And it was tons of work.
Was it? It's way harder than just coming up, just hitting them with the bullet points.
Yeah, it took us another 7 months after we had the first book written. And personally, I hired 2 coaches just to get through it for my contribution to it, because I didn't know what I was doing. I think that it's hilarious that I hired multiple coaches to write a book on coaching, isn't it?
I don't know if it's hilarious. It's probably pretty appropriate, right? At least
Yeah.
you. I mean, the saying in the fund management world is like, you'll eat your own cooking in that case.
Yeah. I just did, and there were things I didn't know. How do I create and resolve conflict at an appropriate pace in a business fiction book? Everyone knows that you need to create and resolve conflict when you're writing fiction, but what's that look like? What's that arc look like? And how many threads of conflict and tension do you keep open at any given time? These are things that I dabbled in because I tried to write screenplays for the last 10 years unsuccessfully, but this was a different animal. So it was fun working with some coaches on it.
Characters are an amazing medium, I think, to come across to make heavy points, but that require subtlety.
Yeah, for sure.
If they weren't, we still. I was going to say if they weren't, we wouldn't still like know the name of Ulysses and Moses and all these just amazing characters, which are really stories or illustrations of like very important points.
Exactly.
God, it's a good thing. It's a good thing the Iliad wasn't written in bullet form of a bunch of takeaways from the ancient Greeks.
Yeah, that would be boring.
Yeah.
And now that we conclude chapter 6, go get a boat, do some maintenance on
it. Not waffling made me think about one of the things that you had in the book. Coaching is the activity that has the greatest impact on individual human performance in a team setting. It's a superlative statement. So tell me, why is it the greatest? Not great, not one of the things that can contribute. Why does it get such primacy?
Yeah, well, because coaching is what you're doing to take somebody from their potential to their reality. And all of us have potential as humans because we're smart people that can do things. And then as we get onboarded and ramped into an organization, we get trained on a lot. But the way that most companies handle training is, lots of people say, I was drinking from the fire hose. Well, if you drink from the fire hose, you're not going to get much water and you're probably going to get hurt. So translating that world where they're training in a way that's ineffective. They're coming up to speed. They're getting information overload. They have resources all over the place. Oh, and by the way, they have big quotas on top of them with time pressure to hit. All of these things. Well, how do we take that person in that environment and get more out of them? It's coaching. It's simply identifying, well, what's the thing that's going to move the needle with them this week, focusing on that and just continuously creating a backlog of challenges that you can work with each team member on. So you're constantly rising them up to the next level, helping them meet their own potential, achieve their goals, which thereby achieves the company's goals, and everybody wins.
Mm-hmm. Have you thought about or sort of discussed with businesses something like the ratio of coach to players, and when that starts to work? Like a lot of the clients that we work with, when we look at their academies more broadly, there's sort of a point at which like there's too few of us right now to set up such a structure. Give me another 3-4 heads and then it will make sense. Or you could see that going up in scale. There's only 200 of us now, so only X number of coaches would make sense. What did you see and learn in terms of sort of a ratio of coaches to players?
Well, I think it depends on if you have full-time coaches or if the managers are taking all the coaching responsibility. I love the companies that hire full-time coaches because they can jump in and be specialists. I posted something on LinkedIn yesterday about how NFL teams typically have 53 players. Well, they do have 53 players. They're full regular season roster, and they'll have an average of 10 coaches. Well, that's a lot of individualized coaching time for folks. The problem with a lot of modern corporations is that the managers are pulled in so many different directions. They're getting pressure from the top around things like forecasting and hiring. They're getting pressure from their team around all kinds of things, from deals to just general HR issues about wanting to be happy, raises, career path, things like that. And then from around them, from their peers, if it's a sales manager, then they're working with sales development, customer success, all those different teams, marketing, et cetera. Well, how much time's left for coaching? And what we often find with frontline managers is the first thing I look at is, what's your calendar look like? And a lot of folks have time management challenges. They've got their one-on-one spaced out all over the place. They don't have time to prep. They're not listening to calls. They're not doing their own pipeline interviews before the pipeline interview meeting. And so there's tons of things that are just mismatched in terms of where they could be from an optimal perspective. And when you see if a manager's got 6, 7, 8, 9 people on their team, they should be spending at least 30% of their time coaching. And coaching can be working to identify the challenge. So that could be the call listening, the pipeline analytics review. It could be actually having that coaching activity and then working with the rep on follow-ups and accountability. What coaching is not is sitting on their calls and super closing their deals for them. Because if you ran a marathon with me on your back, I did not run a marathon.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about that. Like what you said, what coaching is not. And I think there's going to be a handful of people that come to this book totally unaware of what coaching is. Like coaching, the last time I encountered that was in a badminton court, right? So I know that's not quite the same, but that'll be the context. There has been a rise of people who have an understanding and a good feel for executive coaching and what that is. And that isn't exactly what you're on to either. So I don't know if it's like doing a poor service, Cory, to your book, to say, which is fiction, to say, hey, take us through the acronym. But there is an acronym, and I like people obviously won't get the full gist of it. I don't want to turn what deliberately was not an acronym bullets frameworks book into an acronym with bullets, but can you give our community just a little bit of a entry point into what you mean when you talk about coaching, because they will be carrying connotations for that word that come from other fields altogether.
Yeah, that's great. Coach is an acronym, C.O.A.C.H. And the way that we set it up is the C and the O are things that the manager does before the live coaching session with the person that works for them. And the reason we did that is that if you prepare for a coaching conversation, you're much more likely to get more out of it, think through how the conversation can go, and be equipped to ask really good questions that are engaging. One of the biggest challenges folks make is they go into coaching conversations and they give top-down directives. Kevin, you will do this. Well, Kevin didn't agree to that. He's gonna say yes because he wants to get out of the conversation because it's uncomfortable. And he knows that as soon as he goes away, he can do whatever he wants. Being top down and telling people what they're going to do doesn't typically work when it comes to coaching. So we want to really spend some time prepping for that conversation, know how it's going to go. So the C stands for challenge. We want to identify one specific thing we're going to coach on. If I coach you on 4 things at once, you're not going to do anything. If you've ever had a golf coach that tried to tell you to check your left arm and your right arm and your knees, your feet, your head, and all of these things, you just get overwhelmed and you hit the ball into the person standing next to you. So the idea of finding one challenge, that one thing that's really going to move the needle, and coaching it today, knowing that you can backlog and create other challenges for the future. That's the first piece. Second subset of that is identifying if it's a mindset challenge, an activity challenge, or a skill set challenge. Someone's got a mindset challenge. They need to do something and see the results in order to start to change their mindset. You can't tell them the earth is flat, but you can show them at the end of the earth that the earth is actually flat. And no, I don't actually believe that. So you got to, and then from
I'm coming back to that.
Yeah, come back to that later. So from a skill set perspective, if someone can't do it and role play with you in your coaching session, they certainly can't do it under pressure with an executive. So identifying, is it a skill set challenge? Is it a mindset challenge? Could it just be an activity challenge where they're just going to get their numbers up? That's often the case for folks in sales development, more transactional customer success roles. Those are places where we see that. So that's the C, the challenge. The O, the outline, is basically just, how am I preparing for this meeting? Where's it going to go? What are some things that I want to touch on around current state? What are some leading indicators of success? And then what's the worst case scenario if we can't resolve that? So the C and the O are things we're doing going into the meeting. Then once we're in there, we've got ACH, Action Plan, which is co-created by us. Like I said, we ask questions. It's a great way to model discovery to your team. Help them understand what the problem is and help them come to a conclusion around what they can do to address it. Let them own it. And if they go off track, you can correct them, but let them come up with their own plan so that they've got accountability and they own it. The C is consequences. Now, consequences don't need to be negative or dire, but it's basically, what's the impact this thing is going to have? Is it going to impact my role today? Is it going to impact my future career progression? Because life has consequences. And again, you don't have to think of it as negative or into the world. You don't even have to use the word consequences with your team. And then finally, the H stands for hold accountable. What specific is this person going to do coming out of this conversation? Send me a recording, drop something into chat every day, whatever it is. And don't let them create more work for you. Have them do something that really creates ownership for them. And they push you things that are digestible and lightweight. So they can resolve the challenge without just making it your problem. So that's the coach framework, the acronym from the story.
Coaching is the place, I think, sometimes where leaders can come to terms with the fact that somebody is actually not worth keeping. Like, I think that can be the venue where you're like, look, I'm doing some remedial work here. I'm enabling you. But actually, maybe this is the place where I really come to a pretty hard realization, like you don't belong here, or you're not coachable, or you're not improving, or something really broken.
Yes.
What do you make of that? Like maybe that's a really great thing, actually, that can be the environment to really prove that out. But it isn't. I suppose there could be people who feel like, oh, this isn't the environment where everybody goes in as a rough stone and they come out as a shiny diamond. Whereas I think in reality, some people come out as like rough, ragged stone chips that are not going to turn into gems. They just come out. They come out the tailings pile.
Yeah, that definitely happens, and I think the good thing about coaching is it's not just the management team realizing that, it's the individual contributor, the person being coached, that also realizes that. And they say, wow, this is what's expected of me. This is what this role is. I think companies do a really bad job of advertising what a role is. It's basically, hey, here's some things that it does. Oh, by the way, we need this different thing right now. So that's not your job anymore. And that can be anything from in a sales role. It could be, oh, we're not selling that product now. It's this. Pricing's changed. Packaging's changed. Oh, your territory is now none of it. Yeah, whatever it is.
Excellent local knowledge.
Yeah, I try. So that's, I think that's an interesting thing that happens. The the employer realizes that it's just not a good fit for them. That's great, because guess what? There's unlimited jobs for people that are decent at anything right now.
Yes.
And go take advantage of that. Even, say what you will about macroeconomics, there are no shortage of jobs for people who are good.
Mm-hmm. You said something about listening in on calls. I'd like to just hear you say that a little bit. It was like, first of all, it was what you were talking about right at the start, right? It's the first, it was your entree into this business called sales, or this activity called sales. And then you just mentioned it as something like a manager's activity. Where does that fit in?
I think managers should spend a bunch of time each week listening to calls, because that's where you learn what's going on. Mm-hmm. And if you don't listen to the calls and you just take the person's word for what's happening, it's not going to work. The self-diagnosing patient is rarely right. Mm-hmm. I constantly have folks come to me and they say, hey, I've got these people on my team. They're really bad at managing objections. Okay, send me a call. Well, they're not bad at managing objections. They're bad at asking discovery questions, so the prospect doesn't know why the heck they're talking anymore. They're bad at setting next steps and expectations and agendas in the prior meeting for the meeting that they're in today, where they're getting that objection. There's all these things that happened before that lead up to these symptoms that they observe. So the minute someone starts telling me what the problem is, I believe that that's a symptom. I don't necessarily believe that they've done a great job of diagnosing the root cause. And that's one of the things that managers really need to work on, is how do we get from symptom recognition to root cause problem diagnosis? Mm-hmm.
That is a really time-consuming activity. And I think it probably connects to the first thing that you were saying, which is the time management challenge, and sort of understanding and maybe reprioritizing across the board. Listening to calls can eat up time. I mean, usually you have to listen to them in real time. I mean, sometimes you can maybe like speed them up or something, but even then you can't listen to them with a single pass.
Well, the way listening to calls has its own skill associated with it. So first of all, everyone should be able to train the ear to listen to them in 2x. And I like to listen at 2.5. If
you speed demon.
You just train your ear and you can do it. It takes a while. You've got to listen to a few hours before it's there. It's hard to comprehend everything, but what you're looking for, you're not sitting there trying to comprehend every word that they're saying. You're sitting there looking for specific moments that potentially could be coachable. Second thing is, if you go into this is why we always say coach the player, not the play. You can't rely on your call recording tool to be your coaching tool. It's not, because there's other things, CRM, all these other things coming from business intelligence analytics, the calendar, then the call recordings, conversations you have directly and indirectly with the person being coached, and indirectly meaning what other people are saying or highlighting to them, teamwork, handoffs, culture, attitude, career trajectory. There's so many things that need to be coached that have nothing to do with recorded calls. Well, but the recorded calls is where you can go find some evidence, empirical evidence of what's actually going on. For example, if you look in the CRM and little Johnny doesn't have next steps on 75% of his deals, well, let's go listen to a couple calls and see what he does at the end. What's he spend his last 5 minutes doing? Let's go to the top of the meeting and see if he previews what the next steps could be, so the prospect's informed around what decision they're going to be asked to make at the end of the meeting. If he's not doing both of those things, then that's what I'm going to coach to. And I don't have to listen to the whole call to get there. I know the root cause of the problem I'm trying to address today is he's got this pipeline full of things, and he's sitting around following up and touching base and circling back and bubbling up to the top of the inbox and all that type of stuff to try to get people back on the calendar, because he's not setting next steps as evidenced by the CRM. Go back to the calls and identify the spots where he should be previewing next steps at the top, confirming them at the bottom, see what he's doing, and then we can coach him on that. But it's not, you can't just use the recording tool as your coaching tool, because it's just a data point. It's not the whole picture.
Mm-hmm. You were just using a use case where little Johnny was, maybe screwing something up. And I think between you and I, we were like, oh, things can screw up here and screw up there and so on. But it's clear in the model that you write and just in practice that coaching is the place where people finally get a little bit of endorsement for some of the stuff that they do, maybe organically or whatever too, but nobody they don't realize that they're absolutely deadly when it comes to like opening a conversation.
Yeah.
And that's also the venue, I think, where the coach has the opportunity to say, you know what, like nobody does a bit of small talk and then a transition into absolute like rigid business like you do. I don't know how you do it. You're just a native, and it's awesome. And we need to like teach others. So I don't know. That's not really a question to you, but I suspect that you've seen the same thing, which is it's pretty equal pans of the balance. Like coaching is a tool to fix you, but also a tool to sort of accelerate whatever happens to be going just beautifully.
Yeah. Accelerate what's happening within the individual and also across the team by leveraging the strengths of the other individuals. And they call it a team for a reason. It's not just a group of people. And we see that a couple of things there. One is you have the ability to learn from other managers. Well, they've coached these challenges in the past. Well, how have they done it? And then the second piece is enablement, product marketing, operations are pushing resources to the sales team. Well, how do we map those two specific coaching challenges that we have? For example, if somebody's not uncovering pain, what resources do we have? And also, how has that been coached in the past? If somebody's not saying next step, same thing. We've got a sales methodology. It's probably a really prescribed way around how to tee up meetings, how to close them out. Same thing with demos. Somebody's not asking engaging questions during demos, not creating velocity, not engaging all their stakeholders. Hopefully you've got a sales methodology that specifically addresses that challenge. If not, then you've got something that you can develop from an enablement programming perspective. So the great coaching drives success within that person, within that manager, within the management group as a team, and then surfaces common chronic issues that might exist to enablement and leadership, and they can build programming around that.
It really is seems like the equivalent of in sports, the videotape, right? It's just like, look, like if we want to know how to deal with, you know, 3 massive defensemen, then like, let me just show you something that happened 9 games ago that was a brilliant moment.
Exactly.
And then you can try to replicate it.
Yeah, for sure. Because, here's an interesting one. So you bring up sports and videotape. Here's a real example of you can't just listen to the call and get the whole picture. Imagine I'm reading the box score, let's say basketball, for example, and Dennis Rodman only got 3 rebounds. I don't watch sports anymore. So many of these people from the 90s. So let's say Dennis Rodman only got 3 rebounds. Well, watching the videotape, it's going to be tough to realize just from watching gee whiz, Dennis doesn't have any rebounds yet. Well, if you look at the box score and you realize, well, Dennis only got 3 rebounds, now we can go back and watch the tape. Well, what was Dennis's positioning looking like? Was he blocking out? Was he, if somebody on his team was shooting the ball, was he going to the basket to try to rebound it, or was he just running down the court to play defense? And there's specific things that you can look for, but the indication that there's a problem in that case comes from the box score, not from the game film. And then the game film helps support what specifically might be going on. So again, all this stuff has to work together. And if you're just giving it up and saying, oh yeah, that's our coaching tool, it's not, because it's an input and there's tons of inputs.
Hey, have you seen any evidence, Cory, in your work that coaching, enablement, maybe conventional training, these things have helped with retention?
Yeah,
because that is such a sensitive and like tender issue for businesses all over the planet, every sector, and they're crying out for salve, just to be like, I'm losing folks and it's hard to find them, etc. And I think it hasn't always been easy to say, well, one of the things, or maybe a key thing, is providing them with a good coach or providing them with good training. That's a source of retention and or maybe good acquisition. What are you seeing?
Well, there's a saying, I don't know who said it. If you whip a horse, it runs faster till it doesn't. And
It sounds like it comes from, if it doesn't come from Texas, it might come from Alberta, that saying.
Yeah. There you go. The Texas of Canada. So if you whip a horse, it runs faster till it doesn't. And I think that's the same thing with employees. And hopefully you're not whipping your employees. But anyways, if you just keep expecting them to produce, well, instead of whipping the horse, why don't you feed it better? Why don't you give it some medicine? Maybe give it a day off. Well, there's lots of different things that you can do to help develop the folks on your team. And if a individual feels like they're continuously working towards what matters to them, then it's going to be great. And that goes to a couple of specific things that we always advise folks to do, which is get to know your team. What specific personal goals do they have? Why are they here? Do they want to get promoted into management in the next 2 years? Do they want to buy a house? I've got clients that tell me, hey, I've got this person on my team. What do I do with them? They hit 150% of goal. They don't want to talk to anybody and they want to retire in 4 years. So let them hit 150% of goal and let them retire in 4 years and go work with everybody else. Whatever, that's fine. You don't have to coach everybody the same way. So make sure you know where they're going. And then the second piece, going back to the sports analogy, when you watch professional athletes on TV, they all have something in common. They've all been coached and coached well for a long time, maybe a decade, maybe 2 decades, maybe even longer. They know how to be coached. You might have people on your team that have not been coached well in the past. Maybe they didn't play sports. Maybe they haven't had good management in the past. There's specific examples there where someone just doesn't know what it is or how to be the recipient of coaching. Well, knowing that, and then also if they have been coached in the past, what's worked? Do they like direct, or are they terrified of direct? Find specific, who was your coach with whatever you did? What was their style? How did it work on you? So then if we take this part of the conversation and wrap it up, I know everyone on my team. I know specifically what they're trying to achieve in life. And I've got some idea of how this job helps them get there. I also know them as a person, where they've been and what type of coaching has helped them realize their potential. Well, leveraging those two facts, that's powerful.
Yeah. I think when you said that even for the process of writing the book on coaching, you had 2 coaches. I have a lot of respect for that, not only because it shows that there isn't like hypocrisy coming out of your pores, but rather that it's like you can, if you've been on both sides of that process, it's like you understand what you're supposed to do when you're on the senior side of that process. So some folks are going to get inducted into this idea of coaching, some through your book, I'm sure. And it'll be new to them because they weren't coached, and yet they're going to have to take one side of that equation now, the senior side, the asymmetrically like senior side, and be the coach. Yeah. But that's a tough thing for them to do and do well right from the start. So I imagine you've seen some steep learning curves around people trying to take the book and be like, cool, now I will coach. And they themselves hadn't been a good recipient of coaching in the past.
It's like learning how to swim. You can watch videos on it and talk about it all day long, or you can just have someone throw you in the water.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
The cool thing about coaching is it works if you do it. And what we've done with the coach framework, we've rolled it out to at this point, I don't know, 350 managers since the book came out. And 350 managers, we typically only work with, up to this point, we've only worked with smaller companies 500 employees and under. I'm open to working with bigger companies now, but sometimes they treat you like an employee and I don't like it. So you get folks that are learning a framework that's easy to apply. They can just go do it. And I think that if you understand the things we just went through around where they want to go and where they've been, if you understand the specific challenges that they're facing, get them to buy into the fact that, and when I say them, the individual contributor, the person being coached, get them to buy into the fact that A, that challenge exists, and B, here's something I'm going to do about it. That makes it easy for the manager. What we're often doing is inserting a little bit of work around the coach framework and memorializing what happens after the meeting in order to eliminate tons of chaos around VP, chief revenue officer, sales ops coming to you and saying, well, what's going on with so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. Let's go have a bunch of meetings and circular conversations around that. Instead, why don't you just nip it in the bud, coach the heck out of them, make them great and move on. Say, boss, get off my back.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Very I mean, very kind of needed.
Yeah. That's it. Because nobody wants their boss on their back.
Yeah.
It's not fun.
What are you writing next? I mean, you've only got 8 titles down to your name. You're only running a venture capital firm and overseeing another 2 enterprises. What you must have tons of time on your hands, Cory.
I'm not running the venture capital firm. I'm just a contributor. But we've got several in late draft form. I've got one called Triangle Customer Success, which is sales fundamentals and frameworks for customer success teams focused on the revenue aspect of it, and not just new business, but retention, upsell, things like that. Because a lot of customer success managers it's not their fault. They were told to be the friend of the customer and not someone who's there to farm both engagement and increased revenue. We got a couple books. There's specialty around discovery and demo, leveraging our triangle selling book frameworks at just a very micro applied level. And then I wrote one called Financial Modeling for Startups, which I think it's kind of close to done, but I've got too many other things to do rather than write a book on financial modeling. So we'll finish it one of these days.
Good stuff. Well, as they come out, we'd love to re-engage you and make sure that our readership is picking up your books. Do you have a gift for the way that you communicate these ideas? And I would say, Cory, you have a gift for certain kinds of observations that don't come out in whatever, say sales literature classically picks up on or shares. I'll give you a little example of that, and hopefully the folks who will listen to this will pick up your other book too, which is Sales Enablement Playbook. But there you talk about these like early warning signs of departure. And it's quite funny. I read it as a piece of comedy because it was so true. So many of these funny little behaviors that people get up to, they suddenly like start loading in data like perfectly every time. You're like, wait a minute, you haven't done that. It's in 5 years since you've been here. And then suddenly it's like unbelievable good behavior. They start, wearing the snappy suit or whatever. So that stuff was funny, but it was very true. And I think that's kind of a special gift you're bringing. That voice came through in 5 Secrets also.
Well, yeah, there's a saying in the oil field in Houston, if you want to raise, all you have to do is wear suits work, because the boss will think that you're interviewing in other places.
Yeah, brilliant. Actually, that's so true, right? At this season too, where everybody's just like paranoid about losing folks.
Yeah. Wear suits at work and they'll give you a raise.
Good stuff. Cory, where should people find you? You're very findable, by the way. I mean, people should just, type in the words and they'll find you. But where would you like to steer people?
Follow me on LinkedIn, CORYBRAY, and I'm writing a lot about we're turning the coach book into a software product called Coach CRM, launching with customers this week. Actually, we got a bunch of paid beta customers that we're launching with, and
good stuff.
Yeah, that's the book coming to life.
What's that gonna look like? So if somebody picks up a subscription, what do they see?
Well, it's interesting. They get a combination of training around all the things that we just talked about. So it comes with training on the coach framework, both through asynchronous videos and then also our customer success program. It comes with the ability to capture all of these coaching conversations as you prep for them, as you execute, create that action plan and the accountability piece. And then the final thing we're really trying to solve for is that lack of collaboration across managers by creating a coaching playbook. A lot of companies have sales playbooks, very few have coaching playbooks. So how do we take the enablement resources, the tribal knowledge from all the other managers who have coached these things in the past, get them in one place? So if you want to promote a new manager, but you're anxious that they're not ready yet, we'll give you a little more resources to be comfortable with that decision. Or if someone's coming in from the outside, be able to ramp them in a way that they can actually have impact. A lot of management promotion and hiring decisions are stalled because leadership doesn't have the bandwidth or resources to get them up to speed. And I think that's a big thing that we're trying to solve for.
Wow, very cool. Okay, we'll steer some folks there. I'm a lot of the people that we're working with, Cory, our mission in their lives is to help them just set up their academy, their internal academy. Sales or business development is the classic first thing that they need. So people don't just go like, hey, I want to set up an academy and I want it mainly to be centered on like how to give and receive feedback to one another. That's usually not like the burning issue, right? Like it's mainly to be centered on like how can people do this tricky craft and bring some money in the door for us, please.
Right.
So that's the start point, but invariably it builds off of there, because once you sort of remedy one issue, you can move to the next and the next. Coaching is always very close behind. So it's like, well, now that the front line is starting to kind of be really effective, clearly the managers can be more effective and we can get a redoubling. So I'd love to steer people to that. Some of the folks that we spend the most time with would probably be keen to first read, I think, what you're doing and then see what you're building with the Coach CRM.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. Sounds great. Yeah. Coaching's important. It works if you do it.
Yeah. So that's all I have, Cory. Anything else you want to say to us or to our folks in Southeast Asia and beyond?
I don't think so. I just appreciate the conversation, Kevin. Thank you so much. And I hope everybody got a couple nuggets out of this.
Good. We'll keep track of you. We'll talk to you soon.